Hi, my name is Paul Offit. I'm talking to you today from the Vaccine Education Center at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. It's Monday, February 23rd, 2026. What I want to talk about today is influenza virus. So influenza causes hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations and tens of thousands of deaths every year in the United States. What's difficult about influenza, it's actually not an easy virus to protect against. The reason is the virus continues to mutate away from antibodies that are being induced by the vaccines. So much so that every year we need to give a new influenza vaccine. In fact, the virus not only mutates from year to year, it mutates during the season, which is the winter season. And it mutates even during a single infection in a person. So it's a moving target. For that reason, people are always trying to make better vaccines to prevent it. So we have a series of vaccines that are available. They're about 50 to 65% effective at preventing severe influenza infection, like hospitalization. But recently, Moderna and Pfizer have started to work on an mRNA vaccine similar to the vaccines that we made against COVID, which are vaccines that saved more than 3 million lives in the United States. So could these mRNA vaccines be better than the current vaccines that we're using? In 2024, Moderna met with the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, to talk about a trial that they wanted to do to see whether their mRNA influenza vaccine worked better than what we had. So they agreed to do a prospective trial involving about 40,000 people in 11 countries, where half of those people, or about 20,000 people, would get the mRNA influenza vaccine, and the other half would get a standard dose influenza vaccine. Now, at the time, the FDA raised the reasonable question that in the United States, people over 65 don't receive a standard dose vaccine. They're recommended to receive the high dose influenza vaccine. But because these studies were being done in Europe, where it's hard to get a high-dose influenza vaccine, the company and the FDA agreed that they would do this trial in using a standard dose influenza vaccine as a comparator, understanding that they might not get a recommendation for those over 65 using the high dose as a comparator, but that they would eventually do the vaccine or test the vaccine in people over 65 using the high dose vaccines, flu vaccine, as a comparison vaccine. So the trial launched, and about 40,700 people were divided in two groups. One half got the mRNA influenza vaccine, the other half got the standard dose vaccine. The trial was completed, and what the Moderna found was that the vaccine was better than the standard dose vaccine, 27% better at preventing influenza-like symptoms, and almost 50% better at protecting against influenza hospitalization. So they went back to the FDA and they said, look, here's the results of the trial. Could you now review these results for the possibility of licensure? And the FDA, even though they had agreed in a written communication that if the company, Moderna, met those criteria established in 2024, that they would review it, which doesn't necessarily mean they would license it, but at least they would review it. They basically went back on their word, their written word. Now that sent a chill through the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, because these trials cost tens of millions of dollars and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to do. You can't do what the FDA did, which is promise that you would review the vaccine if they met certain criteria, have the country meet those criteria, or the company rather meet those criteria, and then say, no, we've changed our minds. You can't induce or introduce that kind of uncertainty into the process. So in any case, 2 weeks later, after they said that they weren't going to review the application by Moderna, they changed their mind and said that they would review it under enormous pressure. So that's good. It's good to know that they now will review this vaccine, this mRNA influenza vaccine, to see whether or not that they want to license the vaccine so that we can all have the possibility of using it. But I think that the initial decision was a frightening one, and hopefully it won't be repeated. Thank you.